You have been handing out weapons your entire life, not to strangers, not to enemies, to the people sitting closest to you. There is something you told someone that you should not have told them. You know exactly what it is. You can feel it when you are around them, that specific, low-level awareness that they are holding something of yours, something you handed over in a moment that felt safe, in a conversation that felt private, to a person you trusted with a version of yourself you were never supposed to make available. And now it exists outside of you. There are 6 secrets you must take to your grave. Never share them with anyone. Not to your best friend, not to your partner, not even to your family, because the more you reveal, the easier you are to destroy. Machiavelli warned us. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." That is not a quote. That is a warning. Machiavelli spent his life studying what happens when the wrong information reaches the wrong person. His writings were so precise about the mechanics of human betrayal that the church banned them, the state condemned them, and every ruler who publicly called them dangerous quietly studied them in private. He did not write about how people should behave. He wrote about what they actually do, because the people around you are not just seeing you, they are collecting you. Every piece you give them goes somewhere you cannot reach and stays there until the moment it becomes useful against you. They are not your enemies, they are just human. And humans use what they are given. So today I am giving you the 6 secrets that must go with you to the grave. They seem harmless to share, but they are the 6 things that, once revealed, make you the easiest man in the room to break. Stay until the last one, because the last one is the one you have already given away without realizing it. 1. Your next move. You have done this. You had something in motion, a business, a plan, a decision that was going to change the structure of your life. And you told someone before it was finished, before it had walls, before the idea had enough momentum to survive the weather of other people's doubt. Maybe you were excited. Maybe you needed to say it out loud to make it feel real. Maybe you trusted the person, and then came the questions. Is that realistic? Have you thought about the risk? What if it doesn't work out? I just don't want to see you fail. And something changed. Not dramatically, subtly. The way a tire loses pressure, not in a blowout, in a slow leak. The clarity you had before the conversation was gone. The certainty that was driving your movement was now contaminated with their uncertainty. They did not break your plan. You handed your unbuilt plan to a person who was not equipped to carry it, and the weight of their doubt collapsed, something that had not yet developed the structural strength to survive it. This is what Machiavelli warned about when he wrote, "He who has not first laid his foundations may be able with great ability to lay them afterwards, but they will be laid with trouble." The foundation of any plan is the silence around it during its construction. In behavioral science, this is called social reality testing, the phenomenon where verbalizing a goal to another person triggers a premature sense of social reality around that goal, which reduces the internal urgency to execute it. In simpler terms, when you tell someone your plan and they respond with interest, your brain processes a fraction of the reward associated with achieving it before you have done a single thing. The pressure that was driving you releases through a conversation, not through action. And the plan that was running on urgency, on hunger, on the specific restlessness of an unspoken ambition, that plan slows down, sometimes stops entirely, for no reason the man can identify except that something felt different after he spoke it. He drained the fuel by talking about the engine. But it is not just momentum that disappears when you announce your next move. It is security. Julius Caesar understood this at a biological level. When he decided to cross the Rubicon, to march his army toward Rome and ignite a civil war that would ultimately make him dictator, he did not convene a meeting. He did not consult allies. He did not test the idea in conversation to see how it landed. He crossed. The announcement was the act. The act was irreversible, and because it was irreversible, there was nothing left for his enemies to block, no ally to be persuaded out of supporting him, no window of time in which the doubt of others could find a crack in his determination. The move was made. The world had to respond to it, not the other way around. When you announce your next move before you make it, you are giving the world time to respond before the move exists. You are asking permission from people whose approval you do not need and whose opposition you cannot afford. You are placing the most fragile version of your idea, the version that exists only in your mind before any evidence, before any result, into an environment full of egos, insecurities and interests that have nothing to do with your success. Execute, then let the results speak. Results do not need explaining. Results do not need defending. Results simply exist, and the world has to organize itself around them. The plan you announced is a question they can answer. The result you deliver is a fact they have to accept. What I am about to tell you next is something that changes every relationship you have the moment you understand it. Because most men do not understand that this specific secret, once spoken, does not just affect a conversation. It permanently rewires how every person who hears it sees you. 2. How much money you actually have. The moment someone knows your number, the real one, the actual balance, the genuine picture of your financial capacity, you become something different to them. Not worse, not better, different. You become a resource. And resources do not get treated the way people get treated. Resources get evaluated, they get managed, they get accessed when needed and resented when unavailable. The person who knew you as a man, with complexity, with history, with the full dimensionality of someone they cared about, now knows you as a figure attached to a number, and that number sits in the back of every future interaction, recalibrating expectations in real time. You decline to pay for something. They remember the number and call it selfishness. You do not immediately offer to help. They remember the number and call it coldness. You set a limit. They remember the number and call it greed. The number does not just change how they ask, it changes how they feel about every answer you give. Machiavelli documented this in his study of the Medici banking dynasty. Cosimo de' Medici, a man who controlled wealth capable of destabilizing governments, who financed wars and owned the loyalty of popes, rode a mule to work, wore plain robes, lived in a house that was elegant but deliberately unspectacular, not because he was humble, because he understood that visible wealth is a tax, and the collectors are the people closest to you. The man who projects calculated modesty does not just avoid requests, he maintains relationships based on his actual presence, rather than his financial utility. People around him engage with who he is, not what he has, and that distinction is the difference between genuine loyalty and proximity based on access. Here is the dark psychology underneath this. In behavioral economics, this mechanism is called resource proximity bias, the cognitive tendency for people to automatically adjust their behavior, expectations, and moral flexibility in proportion to their perceived access to another person's resources. Translation: the more they believe you have, the more they believe they are entitled to, and entitlement, once installed, is almost impossible to remove without producing resentment. Think about what happens in families. You grow. You build, you begin to exceed the financial position of the people around you. You tell them not to boast just because they are your family and you trust them. And within months, the dynamic has shifted in ways nobody announces but everybody feels. Suddenly your opinion on financial matters carries weight it did not carry before, so does your obligation. So does your culpability when something goes wrong for someone else. Keeping your financial reality private is not arrogance. It is the preservation of relationships that can only be genuine if they are not contaminated by the knowledge of what you are worth. The man who never reveals his number never has to wonder whether people are there for him or for it. We have covered what you must protect about your future and your finances. Now we go somewhere more personal, somewhere most men do not want to go, because this next secret you have already broken it, and the damage is already in someone's hands. 3. Your deepest insecurity. You said it in a moment that felt safe. The relationship was good, the intimacy was real, the conversation had gone somewhere, honest, and the other person had shared something vulnerable, and it felt like an exchange, like revealing something would create closeness, understanding, a connection deeper than the surface. So you named it, the fear that lives at your center, the thing that keeps you up at 3 in the morning. The insecurity that has been with you since before you knew what to call it, the wound that has not fully closed. And they held it. They said the right things. They did not use it immediately, they put it somewhere, but it exists now, in them, and it has a very specific property. It waits, not with malice necessarily, not with a plan, it simply waits until the relationship reaches a pressure point, a conflict, a moment where they are losing ground and need to recover it, and then, without fully deciding to, their hand reaches for the most effective tool available, the one you handed them. You've always been like this. Remember when you told me you felt like you'd never be enough? This is exactly what you said you were afraid of. You did not just share a fear. You built a weapon and handed it to someone who would eventually be in a position to use it. This is called vulnerability exploitation. In clinical psychology, the process by which intimate disclosures made in safe conditions become accessible as psychological leverage. Once the relational dynamic shifts, it is not always intentional. The brain under social threat reaches for the most precise available tool, and precision tools come from the people who gave us the most detailed map of their interior. You drew the map, you handed it over, you showed them exactly where to cut. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who served the Emperor Nero and watched that proximity nearly destroy him, wrote, "He who is brave is free." The bravery he was describing was not physical courage. It was the internal discipline to carry your own weight without outsourcing it to people who are not structurally equipped to hold it. Your insecurities are not meant to be shared. They are meant to be conquered. In private, in the work you do at hours nobody sees. In the journal nobody reads. In the gym at midnight, when the only witness is the version of yourself you are building. The man who processes his vulnerabilities privately and converts them into discipline does not give anyone a targeting coordinate. He shows up to every room as the finished version, the scar, not the wound. You cannot target a scar, it is already healed. It just shows you where the man has been and what he survived. Stop handing people the wound and expecting them to be careful with it. Nobody is that careful. The next secret is one that most men break every single day without realizing the cost. And the cost does not arrive immediately. It arrives 6 months later from a direction you did not see coming, through a person you did not expect. 4. Who you cannot stand. You said something about someone, not in public, not loudly, in a private conversation with someone you trusted, a friend, a family member, a colleague. You said what you actually thought about a specific person. The co-worker who undermines you in meetings, the family member who has been draining resources for years, the friend who has never once been genuinely happy about anything good that happened to you. You said it because it was true, because carrying the opinion alone was exhausting, because saying it out loud felt like relief. And then it traveled. It always travels. Not because the person you told is deliberately disloyal, because information about other people is social currency. People share it the way they share anything valuable, to build connection, to demonstrate trust, to make conversation. Your private assessment of someone else becomes the content of another conversation you were never part of. And eventually, inevitably, it reaches the person you described, not exactly as you said it, distorted by the chain of transmission, amplified by the insecurities of the people who carried it. Stripped of the context that made it a reasonable observation and reduced to the version that produces the most reaction. He said you're not to be trusted. That sentence, or a version of it, arrives, and now you have an enemy you did not consciously make, armed with a grievance they believe is legitimate, in a position to do damage you never anticipated. Machiavelli was precise about this. He wrote, "Keep your friends close, and your enemies closer." But the deeper instruction, the one most people miss, is that the distinction between friend and enemy is not permanent. It is conditional. It is dependent on whether your interests and theirs remain aligned. And the moment they diverge, the friend who knows your opinions becomes the enemy who has your intelligence file. The man who keeps his assessments of people entirely private maintains something more valuable than discretion. He maintains freedom of movement. He can walk into any room. He can work with any person. He can navigate any social environment without the weight of disclosed opinions creating invisible obstacles ahead of him. Nobody can quote him against someone. Nobody can weaponize his words in a political dispute he was not part of. Nobody can use the truth he spoke in confidence to construct a narrative he cannot defend against. Think of it this way. Sharing your private opinion of someone with a third party is like handing a stranger the password to your email and then trusting them to never use it. You can believe they are trustworthy, you can believe they care about you, and still the password exists in their hands. And a password in someone else's hands is a door they can open without you. Keep your assessments internal. Let your behavior communicate your position without your mouth confirming it. The most dangerous man in any room is the one nobody can quote. We are past the halfway point, and the secrets are getting darker. The next one is the one most men carry like a physical weight, and the moment the weight becomes unbearable, they make the most expensive mistake of their lives. 5. Your past sins and transgression. You have done things. Not crimes necessarily, not acts of obvious malice, but things that, examined in the cold light of now, required a version of you that you are not comfortable being associated with publicly. Calculated moves, ruthless decisions, moments where you chose your outcome over someone else's well-being, and the outcome was worth it, but the method was not something you would advertise. You carry this, not in guilt necessarily, though sometimes in that, more often in the specific weight of the unconfessed, the thing nobody knows. The private knowledge that the version of yourself you present to the world is not the complete version, that there is a room in the building most people never see. And at some point, in a conversation that feels safe, with a person who seems capable of holding it, in a moment of intimacy that creates the illusion that full honesty is possible, the weight becomes too heavy. You open the door. You want absolution. You want someone to hear the worst of you and stay. You want to be known completely and accepted anyway. Do not do it. Not because the impulse is wrong, because the person across from you cannot give you what you are looking for. Nobody can. The absolution you are seeking does not exist in another person's response to your confession. It exists in who you have become since the act, in what you did with the weight, in the discipline it produced, and the man it built. What the person across from you can give you is something entirely different from absolution. They can give you a permanent record. This is what in dark psychology is called confessional leverage, the dynamic where a private disclosure made in search of emotional relief is retained by the receiver as an informational asset. The receiver does not decide to weaponize it, but in every future conflict, every power negotiation, every moment where they need to establish moral high ground over you, their brain presents it as the most available tool. You told me what you did to get where you are. That sentence ends negotiations before they begin. Look at history. Thomas Cromwell, advisor to Henry VIII, one of the most powerful men in Tudor England, used the private confessions of those around him to build and maintain his position. He did not extract these confessions by force. People gave them willingly, trusting in his discretion, believing the information would strengthen their relationship with him. It strengthened his position over them. He held those confessions the way a banker holds collateral, not always drawn upon, but always there, always available, always capable of being presented at the precise moment its value was highest. Your past is yours. What you did with it, how it shaped you, what it cost you, what it produced, that belongs to you entirely. It is not content for a conversation. It is not a gift you give someone in exchange for their continued presence. If you need to process it with a professional who is legally bound to silence and has no stake in your social world. Everyone else gets the finished man, not the production notes. Everything we have covered has been building toward this. The next secret is not about protecting information from others. It is about protecting the most dangerous thing you carry, the full picture of who you are becoming, from a world that will do everything in its power to keep you from becoming it. 6. The extent of your ambition. Most people around you can handle your current self. They have calibrated to it. They know the version of you that exists right now, your income level, your position, your social weight, your place in the hierarchy of the environments you share. They have built their relationship to you around this version. Their comfort with you is, in part, a function of their ability to predict you. What they cannot handle, what the system around you is not built to survive, is the version of you that you are actually building toward. The version that exceeds every expectation anyone in your current environment has formed. The version that will require years of unseen, unannounced, unvalidated work in rooms nobody visits. The version that, if fully described in a single conversation, would produce one of two reactions: dismissal from the people whose imagination cannot contain it, or fear from the people who understand it well enough to feel threatened by it. Neither of those reactions serves you. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." This is not a statement about deception. It is a statement about strategic revelation, the prince who shows the court only what the court needs to see, who performs the version of himself that produces the outcomes he requires, is not being dishonest, he is being precise. He is understanding that full transparency is not a virtue, in a world where information is the currency of power. The man who reveals the full extent of his ambition too early hands the world a timeline, and a timeline is an invitation for everyone around him to mark the dates when he has not yet arrived and present those dates as evidence of failure. Here is the mechanism that makes this so damaging. In social psychology, this is called expectation anchoring, the process by which a stated goal becomes the reference point against which a person's progress is measured by the people around them. Once you have named the size of your ambition, every moment in which you have not yet achieved it is perceived by you and by them as a deficit rather than a process. The man who said nothing and arrived is a success. The man who announced his destination and has not yet reached it is already being discussed as someone who may not make it. Your ambition is not a social object. It is not for display. It is not something you share in conversation to feel the warmth of someone's interest in it or the validation of their excitement. It is the engine of your entire trajectory. And engines are not displayed. Engines are protected, maintained, operated in controlled conditions with limited access and zero tolerance for contamination from outside elements. Alexander the Great, who at 32 had conquered more of the known world than any man before him, was famously private about his strategic thinking, even with his most trusted generals. His plans existed fully formed only in his own mind until the moment of execution. When asked about his next move, he deflected. When pressed for detail, he gave only what was operationally necessary for the immediate task. His ambition was the most closely guarded intelligence in the ancient world, because he understood something that most men never learn. The man who announces what he is building gives every person around him the opportunity to decide in advance whether they believe it is possible. And most people, anchored to the present, comfortable with the current arrangement, invested in the version of you that does not threaten their own ceiling, will decide it is not. Their decision becomes doubt. Doubt becomes a voice. The voice enters the conversation. And every time you hear it from them or from the part of yourself that has absorbed it, it costs you something that cannot be refunded. Keep the full depth of what you are building entirely private. Let the world encounter the result without the warning. Let the version of you that arrives be so far from the version they knew that they cannot reconcile the distance. That distance is the measure of what you protected. That distance is the space where the real work happened. And the man who protected it, who moved in silence through years of unseen effort, who resisted every invitation to announce, explain, or seek validation for what he was building, that man owns every inch of what he has built. No one held it for him. No one helped carry it. No one gets to stand next to it and claim proximity to its construction. It is entirely his. That is not loneliness. That is the architecture of a man who understands that the most powerful things in the world are built in silence, announced by their existence, defended by their results. 6 secrets. Your next move, your financial reality, your deepest insecurities, your private assessments of people, your past sins, the full extent of your ambition. None of these are things you keep because you are ashamed of them. You keep them because they belong to you. And what belongs to you does not leave your hands until you decide, deliberately, strategically, on your own terms, that the time has come to reveal it. Machiavelli's entire body of work rests on one foundational understanding that most people are too uncomfortable to accept. Information is power, not intelligence, not strength, not wealth. Information. The man who controls what is known about him controls the dynamic in every room he enters. He controls the narrative. He controls the expectations. He controls the weapons that are available to the people around him because he never provided them. The man who speaks everything he knows, feels, plans, and carries, that man gives the world a complete map. And a complete map is an invitation to navigate him, to predict him, to manage him, to use the landscape of his interior against him at the moment of maximum effectiveness. You are not a landscape. You are a fortress. And a fortress does not leave its gates open to prove it has nothing to hide. It keeps its gates closed, precisely because what is inside is worth protecting. Take these 6 secrets to your grave, not because the world deserves your silence, because you deserve the protection of it. If this video named something you have been carrying, if any of these 6 secrets produced recognition or discomfort, or the specific cold clarity of understanding something too late, like this video, not as a courtesy, because it tells me the right person found this content. Subscribe if you have not. This channel exists for one reason, to deliver the kind of clarity that the rest of the internet is too careful to give you. Now, what I gave you today is what this platform allows. There are levels to this that I cannot reach in a public video. Psychological frameworks too precise, manipulation architectures too sharp, behavioral intelligence too targeted for an algorithm that punishes the sharpest truths and rewards the safest ones. Those frameworks exist behind the join button below. Inside is a circle of men, deliberately small, deliberately selective, who are done operating blind in a world that runs on information they were never given. Men who want the unfiltered, uncensored breakdown of human psychology that most people spend their entire lives navigating without a map. This is not for everyone. It was never designed to be. If you are a tourist in this space, someone who watches for entertainment and moves on, keep scrolling. The membership is not built for you. But if you watched this video and felt something shift, if you recognized the architecture of what has been running on you, and you want the deeper mechanics, the full framework, the level of psychological intelligence that changes how you operate permanently, the join button is below. The men inside did not hesitate. You already know which category you are in. You stayed until the end. In a world engineered to fracture attention every 30 seconds, finishing this video is not a small thing. It says something about the quality of your focus. Guard it. It is one of the most valuable things you own. Remember, the secrets you keep are the territories you control. And the man who controls his territory cannot be mapped, cannot be navigated, cannot be broken. I will see you in the next one.